Hello, hola, and welcome to the Audacity of Joy podcast, where we answer the central question: what role does joy have in our work to promote justice, transformation, and healing? I'm your host, Jennice Chewlin, public health champion, entrepreneurial activist, affectionately named La Reina of Joy, and CEO of the workplace wellbeing consultancy, Chewlin Group. In this podcast, you'll hear from changemakers, creatives, and leaders who are using joy as a strategy for change, celebration, and challenge. Each episode offers real talk about burnout, recovery, and the courage to choose joy in spaces that often forget it. Listen to spark curiosity, reflection, and action. This isn't about ignoring struggle. It's about daring to imagine differently. It's a movement helping change makers rediscover joy as a tool for well-being, resilience, and healing. Because one thing for sure is that joy helps us hold both pain and the possibility. It builds capacity for empathy, creativity, and courage. The same tools needed in leadership and change making. Listen and subscribe to hear from leaders, explore how joy shows up in their lives, work, and how they lead. Thank you to our sponsor, Chewlin Group, who is on a mission to bring the audacity of joy to transform organizations to become drivers of health and well-being, to build trust, collaboration, and impact. Welcome, everybody, to the Audacity of Joy podcast. I am excited to bring you another special guest with you here today. I'm introducing April L. Carter. April L. Carter is the Chief Program Officer for Tennessee Nonprofit Network, where she oversees all of the ways nonprofit professionals learn, connect, and engage across the state. She is the co-founder of Roots and Wells Coaching alongside her pastor and husband, Jerry. A mom, mentor, and Memphian, April is deeply rooted in her community and lives by the motto, serve well, live fully. April, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It is such an honor to be here and to connect with you as always.
I always love to introduce my guests and how I met them, how you got in my orbit. And I want to share with listeners that I was facilitating a discussion for the National Council of Nonprofits for their annual convening, where it brought all the state associations. And I was talking about joy. And I asked folks to pair up and get in groups around, what does joy mean to you? What role does it have in your work? And what you shared hasn't left me, April. And it was around the metaphor of joy being like a window. Do you remember what you said? Could you share with my listeners your definition of joy and what you meant by it being a window?
Oh gosh. Yes, joy being a window, kind of representing hope where you're in a room and you look over and there's like a window. So no matter what you've been doing in that room all day, it could have been working, you could have just been at home and your family. You have to approach it. You have to go out and look to see what is beyond where you are now. And we kind of had some group conversations about the window being fragile. Sometimes you may approach too hard and the window breaks, but there's always room for repair. But, we went down this long rabbit hole. But yeah, I do remember that.
Yes, I love that so much. I hadn't heard that before, and it has stayed with me even to explain it to other folks. So thank you for that. April, would you like to give a little introduction about you, what you work on, what you're passionate about for our listeners?
Yes, and I will say that that was my favorite session at the convening because joy is something that has really been resonating with me and how I approach my work, my family, my personal relationships for the last few years, and just trying to understand what joy is and how do we define it individually and as a community. And so with Tennessee Nonprofit Network, I have been with probably about 3 or 4 different iterations of the organization. I've been here to about 20 years. I lose count around 15, but I know that it's somewhere between 15 and 21. But I have really been honored to see how the organization has grown. We started in Memphis, Tennessee as a regional association, just supporting nonprofits around grants, looking for grants, applying for grants, and staying in compliance when they get those grants. But we kind of saw how nonprofits needed a little more support around capacity building, nonprofit operations. And so we grew in our trainings, consulting, and different support around nonprofits. And fast forward, Dr. Kevin Dean came on board as president and CEO and really saw a vision for, at the time, Alliance for Nonprofit Excellence to support nonprofits statewide because we didn't have that voice. And in my many roles within the organization, I have just been so excited to go on that journey.
That's wonderful. And how many nonprofits does TNN support?
So we have been a state association, the first state association for the state of Tennessee, and one of the last states to become a state association in the U.S. And so across Tennessee, there are about 40,000 nonprofits. And currently, over the past 2 years, we've been able to connect with about 2,100 nonprofits. And so we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of new nonprofits to meet and connect with so that we can support, but the 2,100 close to our hearts, and we are so proud to have them.
That's awesome. I can see the work online that you all share. I mean, you're busy getting boots on the
Yes.
ground to where they are to try to meet everyone. So good for you. Kudos to you. Dr. Dean, I love following his newsletter as well. For our listeners, you should get on that newsletter, especially if you're in the social impact space. His writing is approachable, it's deep, and he talks about joy in his work as well, which I appreciate.
He
And
does.
actually, I'd love to highlight one thing I learned from that confab, the convening that they had, was he talked a little bit about the work that TNN is doing when it comes to promoting the health and well-being of the nonprofit sector. And I remember learning that TNN does a special. There's a word that you all call it, like a week off, week of rest. Can you tell
Yes,
me a little
nonprofit
bit?
week of rest. We are going into our third year of implementing that. Yes, and that is very exciting. That actually started in-house with TNN. When we were just a regional association with big plans to go statewide, we really had to go hard. And Dr. Dean saw just the pressure that it put on the employees, and we were working around the clock. We were working on long hours. We didn't really take our PTO that first year, and it took a toll on the staff. And so we sat down and had a conversation about it and said that rest is just as important as the work that we are putting into it. And so we had an internal week of rest just for our staff. And when we came back, we saw just the power that it had to refresh us, to connect us, to allow us just to kind of reflect on the work that we're doing to be able to come back more excited and more prepared. And so after that, we offered it out to other nonprofits. And then we kind of talked about the benefit that it had for us and the importance and how vital it is to have rest and implement rest.
I love that. I mean, way to take charge on that, because I heard how even the Tennessee funders are like, "Oh, it's their week of rest. We're not going to email them. This at this moment. We're going to honor that." And I thought that impact, whereas it was started internally, supported through leadership, it is now making its ripple effect of other nonprofits outside of Tennessee,
Yes, yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I want to highlight and this will help us transition to joy, because you talked about the impact of what that rest did for you all. And you talked about how it helped you come back with reflection and that power of, like, I'm rested, I'm ready and creative to strategize on, like, our new work plan, our new strategic plan.
Yes, yes, and with rest, and I will say, in addition to the nonprofit week of rest, TNN does offer flexible PTO, where we're able to take time off, as needed. And initially, there was concern that, oh, if you give them too much time off, they're going to take advantage of the system. But we have not had a single incident of that because we do work hard. We make sure we meet deadlines and things of that nature. But rest is vital. But also knowing that we have family and other obligations outside of TNN, so, having that flex PTO time where, we could take off to support our families, vacations, doctor's appointments, and things of that nature, in addition to the week of rest. The week of rest is supposed to be just rest. Like, don't take family vacations or all of the other things. Well, you can take a vacation, but it is solely dedicated to rest. That is the purpose of that. But with the flex PTO, that has just really been a great way for us to take the time off and come back. And it's just like a light bulb goes off. No, it's hard to take the time off and not think about work. But when you're in other environments, when you travel and you see the way nonprofits operate, outside of Tennessee, it's a really good way just to, come back and say, oh, I saw this happening in other cities and let's rest. And my brain is not in a hyperdrive and overdrive, is coming back in the office and saying, okay, I haven't thought about this. I have fresh eyes on this project. I have fresh eyes on this initiative. How can we work together? How can we think a little bit differently to approach the work? And that has been a phenomenal approach for all of our staff.
That's really great to hear. I mean, we need to keep sharing stories like this, that it is
Yes.
possible to integrate rest through policy, leading
Yes.
by example,
Yes.
and creating that ripple effect. I'm sure people are reaching out to you and saying, how do you really implement the week of rest, or how do you really implement those flexible PTO? And what I love to see about the network across the nation for nonprofits is that you all collaborate in these amazing ways to strategize together, to make room for ideas, and to tackle those challenging questions.
Yes, National Council for Nonprofits has been instrumental in bringing us together, helping us to convene, and helping us to share ideas. Because you do get caught up in the mundane day to day task of operating a nonprofit, developing programs, and you don't always take the time to think, well, someone else is doing this, someone else is sharing in this work and may have brain fog or whatever in approaching the work. And so what National Council does is, offer think groups for us to come together on a monthly basis. We're on an email chain where if something comes up, we just shoot a quick message out. And, the answer is there. Someone has already thought about this, or they're in the process of researching and gathering data to support whatever that issue is. And so with that, it takes a lot of time off our plates and planning and thinking through it because we have a network of people that's doing the same work or similar work, or they can offer suggestions on how we can do it differently. And we don't have to spend 2 months ideating when we have a network of folks that's already there.
Love that. So shout out to NCN leadership
Yes.
from Diane Yentel and her incredible team making that happen. I love that. And now, I mean, I think this is a good segue, able to transition to what you started with, saying, I've personally have used joy to in the last few years to navigate personal and workplace. And I'd love to hear from you. Maybe first, can you help us? Because I believe everyone has their own definition of joy. Can you start by sharing with us how you define joy and what role it's had in the last few years, to your point?
Yes. So I've been thinking about this for a couple of years, and I still don't have a solid definition of what joy is. But I've kind of thought through what it is and what it is not. For joy, we always hear that it's different from being happy. It's more deeply connected to who we are. And for me, joy is the deep. It goes beyond just a deep feeling. It's a deep connection to knowing who you are and how that shows up in the world. It's connected to our purpose, it's connected to our community, and connected to who we are in our everyday lives. And so for me, joy can only be implemented in community, is revealed in community. Even though it is something deeply personal to us, joy manifests in how we engage with others. And so I've taken that approach to how I lead my team, how I interact with my family, when I'm volunteering, all of those things. I can't be joyful just on my own. It manifests in community.
That's beautiful. I'm, like, trying not to, like,
Yeah.
too much because you're highlighting that it's a multiplier. I
Yes.
love that you're saying it's embodied in community,
Yes.
and it reminds me of what I shared at that convening, which was that the word mudita, which is the joy you feel for someone else's joy. And in a way, what you're saying reminds me of that multiplication, the multiplier of joy. Of if April is bringing that into work and feels connected to her purpose, I'm gonna feel that. That's gonna radiate from you, and I'm
Yes.
sure people have said that about you.
Yes, yes, and a really great example of that, and when we were at the independent sector conference, we took the entire team, and we typically have 3 or 4 teammates that travel all the time. But one of my colleagues that rarely travels with us decided to come along on this trip. And so with this colleague, she's a very clean eater. She loves to eat clean. She's very intentional about bringing her breakfast and her lunch to work so that she always knows what she's consuming. The rest of us, we're not so mindful. We love food and we love to gather around food. And so typically when we are in the office, that's easy. If we're ordering in, if we're having any kind of potluck, we know that this colleague is very mindful of what she eats. So it's just easier. But when we travel, it's not so easy. And so the first night that we were there, we love to gather together as a staff. We decided to go out to eat. And so we're sitting there and we're looking over the menu and we're all excited. And then I kind of look over at her and she's visibly anxious because this is not something that she would typically consume. And of course, she still wants to be a part of the team. And so she decided to get like hummus or something like that. And so when the server came over, I asked her, "Hey, do you by chance just have just regular arugula in the back?" And she was like, yeah. I was like, can we get a bowl, just a bowl of arugula to go with hummus? And my colleague's face like lit up, like she was almost in tears because, that was a way for her to, be with community, be a part of the team and not feel judged. But that only came from conversations that we've had over the years, recognizing that, she is living in her purpose. She wants to be a part of the team, but she also doesn't want to feel disconnected from us. And then for me, recognizing that she may not be comfortable in this situation, she wants to eat clean and she doesn't want to be forced to, eat something that she wouldn't typically eat at home. But just little moments like that brought me joy and it brought her joy because we were living in our purpose, our value to say that the team matters, that other people matters. And just a simple bowl of arugula allowed us just to have just a wonderful team building, food sharing, wine toasting evening together outside of Tennessee.
That's beautiful. What a story. And
Yes.
I can't help but also hear the value behind that story is belonging. She
Yes.
felt seen and heard by you.
Yes. Yes.
She
Yes.
didn't have to speak up. You
Yes.
spoke up for her because you know her from these other conversations outside of this context. And
Yes.
I love that you are talking about joy and I'm hearing belonging.
Yes. 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 A critical part of joy is belonging because if joy is revealed and sustained in community, then element of belonging has to be there.
That's beautiful. Wow. And this is why this podcast exists, that I want people to see joy as more than two dimensional. I want it to for folks to see that it's three-dimensional, that there are multiple pathways to joy that lead us to these other huge important values that let us live a life that we can be in purpose, where we can be valued and seen so we can keep going. There is
Yes.
important work to do, as I know you can contest to, that there right now we're living in a place where there is a lot of destruction, distraction, dismantling, and sometimes conversations like this, April, I'm sure around joy may seem, not well received because it's not the right time. I'm doing air quotes, time for joy. And I'm wondering if you have a response to that.
Yes, it is very difficult because when we are defining joy simply as a feeling, or we are defining joy as like a toxic positivity, and it ignores all of the things that's happening in the world, I don't agree with that definition because joy uh, it goes deeper than that, and joy is a choice that we make every day, every hour, and it can only be sustained in community. When I think about joy with everything that's going on in the world, and right now with Tennessee Nonprofit Network, we are, every day thinking about these things. How do we be mindful of what's happening in the world and still help people to connect with their purpose, connect with who they are, and help them to see, to know that they're valued, their voice is valued, and that they belong. Joy comes in it for me because it is a daily thing when you're looking at what's going on around the world. Joy is saying that no matter what is going on around the world, my purpose matter, my call matters, and so it's not retreating. It's not saying that if I feel joy is not like happy, oh hey, I'm here, I'm happy, I'm just so positive. Joy is saying that, I have hope. No, it is that window, like whatever's happening in this room, it is that window. I can see, I know that there's something on the other side of the window, and I only have a small view. I only have a small perspective, but I have to move forward. I have to do the work. I have to go outside. And that's what joy is. It is decision to say that my purpose, my identity, who I am, my community, uh, is all going to come together to do the work to get us on the other side of that window. It is a deep commitment to say that I know that my purpose has a purpose, that what I believe, that the work that I've been called to do has a purpose. And I'm hopeful in that because I don't have to just sit back and just accept everything that's happening. Joy is the encouragement and the push and the drive that gets me on the other side.
I love that. That's a great explanation. I think many people will resonate with that, especially the light makers, as I've learned from the author Karen Waldron. She talks a lot about being a light maker. And there's a book she wrote called The Light Maker's Manifesto. And in it, she interviews different people in different sectors doing their purpose work. And she said, sometimes we gotta just take the small like pieces of wood and start our own fire. And that is joy making. And April, I remember you sharing with me that I want to bring it back to like you having joy as this tangible strategy, not just a feeling or abstract, but now using joy as a strategy to navigate celebration, change, and challenges. You shared with me a story how when you were planning your own state's conference, nonprofit conference, how you started that. And I think listeners would love to hear how you use joy as a strategy.
So when we are planning any big event, our conference is a good example. We come together, we do the regular planning, but we always start with the sentence, "But first, joy." Like, what is bringing you joy in this moment with the conference planning? If we meet our goals, if the conference is a success, what does joy look like for you in that? And so we hear things like, if two people come to the conference and they learn how to fundraise better, that brings me joy because now one organization that I'm passionate about is making a difference in the community. Or if it's just planning, I get the registration page together. That brings me joy because a part of my purpose is data. I'm collecting data. I am making it easy for others in our community to be able to register with no problem. And it's like seamless process for folks. But just starting with joy, like what is bringing you joy in this moment? And it's usually connected to our outcomes, our plans, our strategies, or it could just be, I can plan my day over a wonderful cup of coffee that has pumpkin spice, and that brings me joy. And so before we even start the planning, it's like, but first, joy. What do you need to stand firm in your joy in this moment as we're planning? And it could be something that happens today, and it could be something that happens down the line. But we've got this big board outside that says, no, but first, joy.
I need one of those. That
Yes.
sounds like is in your face as a reminder, but first joy.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
want to connect to, how you were saying that in that particular event planning, you were, folks were using external things that they were
Yes.
trying to accomplish, but it was again tied back to their purpose, their impact, which is if someone learns how to better fundraise, that's going to benefit their community.
Yes.
And if I can get this registration page, that means we can bring hundreds of our folks together in community. So I just
Yes.
wanted to connect that piece because we do talk a lot about joy being internal and personal, but I'm connecting it back to what we're also saying, which it's a multiplier. It happens in small moments. It happens in intentional moments too.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and I think that that's important to note because sometimes we think that it's always big and grand, which it can be. Joy can be those things. It is oftentimes in the moments what you said, like giving yourself a little extra, treating yourself special with that spice on top because you don't normally. And today you're going to take it slow. You're going to be in intention. Thank you for sharing that. And I know there was another story you wanted to share about the use of joy as a strategy.
Yes. Now, this one was early on in another iteration of the organization. My other colleague and I were in the midst of moving offices. Our leadership decided that we had just purchased new office furniture for the new space we were moving into, but it was not a budget for movers. And so we were not happy about this. And so there was a moment where we had packed up, we shredded a bunch of old paper and all of these things. And so we had to take all of this stuff out to this big dumpster. Now we were in like a 23-story office building. And so of course the dumpster area was not pleasant at all. And so we had a couple of rounds of taking things down to the dumpster. It was smelly, it was hot, it was just not a good time for us. And so we just kind of looked at each other and said, why are we doing this? And my colleague said, if we get through this, this will be a core memory for us. And this is something that we can always go back to. And so with that, we just kind of laughed. It was like, you know what? This is a core memory that we're forming. And so as we're going back in for to the dumpster, we were just laughing and saying, we're going to remember this a year from now. We are going to remember this moment. And we found a pocket of joy in an uncomfortable situation, in a situation where we were hot and it was smelly. And then now, fast forward 10 years later, we laugh at that. We laugh at them. It's like, can you believe that we actually started our career here, moving big trash bags to a stinky dumpster? And from that, we've become really close colleagues. We rely on each other, we trust each other, and we knew that we both would be there in the work moving forward. That if we were planning a huge conference, if we were planning an elegant gala or something like that, of course, we know that we have someone in the work that'll show up. But when it comes to having to move trash bags to a stinky dumpster and knowing that you have someone there with you, it kind of changes things, and to be able to find a pocket of joy there was amazing. And I will say, later on that year, we did get some really nice Christmas bonuses after that, so it it kind of worked out. But just
Yeah.
finding a moment of joy for me, I'll never forget that moment.
And that's such a beautiful reminder, April, that you took of like taking challenge and how joy can translate it into something else. Not change the context. You are moving trash, it's stinky,
Yes.
you're sweaty, it's
Hmm.
awful. But
Yes.
someone popped up and said, "Wait a minute, this is gonna be a core memory for us."
Hmm.
And in turn, it sounds like it became this bridge between the colleagues there that 10 years later now, like, you've built that trust
Yes.
and that impact from that challenging moment.
Yes, and we still make references to it today to like, is this a dumpster moment or is this something else? And if it's a dumpster moment, we know that, okay, we need to buckle down, we need to get ready because it is not going to be pretty, but we are going to make it on the other side of this.
Wow, so you even have a word for it, of
Yes.
taking that challenge and saying, "Our we know how we've done this before. We know how to do hard things. Is this one of them?" And you all agree or you don't, and you move on to work
Yes.
on that. That is
Yes.
beautiful. And I love that this conversation has been centered on the opportunity to use joy as a window to look beyond the context, not in a toxic positivity way, not in a way that ignores the challenge or difficult, but helps us move beyond that. And then you also talked about how joy has been inviting to your colleagues, especially that but first joy. That's an invitation
Yes.
for colleagues to join you in this movement that you're making.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
It's also very powerful. And I know our listeners are going to walk away with little tidbits of like, oh, yeah, but first joy. I think I'll make a mug with that or a t shirt, you know?
Yes.
And I'm wondering, April, is there any, last thoughts that you have for our listeners who, are excited about using this strategy? Maybe new leaders who are has a small team and they're thinking about ways to implement joy in their work. I wonder if you have any last tips, tidbits for them.
For us, it's been really important to actually have conversations. We start with but first joy, and we have those conversations, but just regular conversations throughout the year, just at a random time at the coffee station, walking to your car, getting to know your staff members, your colleagues in a meaningful way. Like those small details that are shared, over a pot of coffee will bring dividends in the future. Just knowing that my colleague loves arugula has bonded us in a way that brought joy, not in that moment, but it developed a trust down the line to for her to know that she belongs, that she is thought about, that we actually listen. So just finding those details throughout the year about your colleagues and being willing to speak up about what you know will bring someone else joy. And in turn, that'll bring you joy as well because it is not a solidarity thing. It is revealed and sustained in community.
I think you've brought such a fresh perspective. Thank you for sharing your stories of real life examples.
And thank you for the work that you do around joy. That moment that we met at the NCN gathering, I think was a joyful moment for me because we were both able to have different perspectives and you were leading the workshop. And it was joyful for us because you were the expert in the room, but you invited us to share our experiences and you lifted that up as a level of expertise. And that's a joyful thing because my joy, my experiences mattered to you. And so that really, really stayed with me for a whole year since then.
Woohoo! Well, I'm so glad to hear that. That's what my mission, my purpose is. And it's joy. Who knew? La Reina of Joy is out here trying to make ripples and multiply so that people can be nourished in the work that they're doing. And to your point, they don't feel alone in this work because joy is done in community. It's an invitation to come together, gather, and collaborate to protect and promote what is good and right in this world.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, April, I want to thank you again for your time today. I want to thank our listeners for making the time to listen to the stories. And I want to wish everyone well. May you find ways to lead and live with a little more joy this week. And stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you, April.
Thank you.
It's easy to think of joy as something we have to find on our own because joy is something we feel within ourselves. But as April shared today, joy is actually something we build together. Whether it's laughing through a chaotic office move or making sure a colleague feels seen at the table, those small moments of belonging are what sustain us for the long haul. As you head back into your day, whether at work, your community work, at home, wherever you live, life, and lead, I want to challenge you. How can you build a little more belonging in your circle? How can you choose joy, not just for yourself, but for the person next to you? Thank you for listening to the Audacity of Joy podcast. If this episode has helped you feel a little less alone on your leadership journey, please leave us a review or share with a friend. I'm Jennice Chewlin, and I will see you at our next episode.